Still have Ed O'Keefe. I know he was there. There he is in
You
Ohio.
do.
Ed, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you're there in Ohio. The notion that at this moment the race is so close, and when you look at the numbers, that Green Party candidate really could be the spoiler here.
Yeah, I mean, this happens, and it's, I think, indicative of the idea that this was just frankly an anomaly. He hasn't been as much of a factor up until now, but in any close race, a few hundred or 1,000 votes that a third-party candidate draws obviously is going to, cause some real consternation. I think if you're a liberal who voted for that third-party candidate tonight, and your Democratic friends find out, you're not going to be their friend much longer, because you may have spoiled this for the Democrats. Because remember, the thinking here is that given that this is a unique summer turnout model, come November, when everyone else actually does show up to vote, there's always a chance that the Republican turnout operation works as it usually does and swings this back to Balderson. So if you're O'Connor and you barely get by tonight, you may see a repeat of that in November. If you win tonight, you're going to have to work even harder come November, because you're going to see so many more people turning out to vote, as is usually the case.
And Ed, let me just ask you as well, there has been a lot of money spent in this contest. Talk to me about that, because obviously when you talk about campaigns and the fact that now it's this close, one thing that's really interesting to look at is how much each side has spent. So we have a rough idea here of those numbers.
Well, O'Connor's campaign raised more money than Balderson, the Republicans' campaign. Mm-hmm. However, Republicans overall, the whole universe of Republican or conservative groups, have outspent O'Connor 2-1, most of it, especially in the closing weeks on television. Throw in the usual attacks at him, that he'd be a liberal who would upset the Trump agenda, that he would side with Nancy Pelosi. He told us point blank yesterday, no, he would not vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Democratic leader. He thinks it's time for new leadership, and he argues that he's the embodiment of that new leadership as a 31-year-old guy who's never served in Washington and is willing to find ways to work with both parties. So, that said, O'Connor himself has been on the air longer than Balderson, making arguments about his desire to work with the other party, hugging familiar Democratic messages of protecting the Affordable Care Act, looking out for Medicare and Social Security, talking up the fact that his own mother had a cancer scare that his family was thankfully able to pay for and deal with, and he knows that there are constituents here who can't or aren't as lucky, trying to personalize it a little bit. And I can't help but notice that today, and in the last few days, he's been reminding voters that he's now engaged to a Republican woman.
Right,
so if he can win over at least one Republican, maybe he can win over several more.
Yeah, I know. That was really interesting to see in his piece. That was really his first response to answer your question, is making sure people were quite aware that he's engaged to a Republican.